What if the thing standing between you and an actually affordable house has nothing to do with land or labor shortages or interest rates, but with the fact that construction has barely changed in 100 years? Look at what's happening on this factory floor right now. Rows of massive printers laying down wall sections, window frames, entire room modules, layer by layer, out of a material that costs a fraction of poured concrete. Homes built this way have had their construction costs cut by as much as 35% compared to traditional building. You've probably assumed a house has to be built roughly the way houses have always been built. Framed, bricked, poured, one skilled trade at a time, because that's just what building something that has to last decades requires. That assumption held up for basically the entire history of construction, right up until a factory in China proved it didn't have to. In the next few minutes, the actual ink these printers use and why it solves two problems at once: the real percentage this saves on material, time, and labor, why a well-funded American competitor still hasn't cracked true affordability after nearly a decade of trying, and what any of this has to do with the house you'll actually be able to afford. Picture a factory floor in Suzhou, China, in April 2014. A company called WinSun, founded by an engineer named Ma Yihei, has spent years building a 3D printer unlike anything in construction before it, more than 30 meters long, wide enough to lay down entire wall sections in one continuous pass. Over the course of a single day, that printer and 3 others like it produced 10 complete houses. Total cost per house, under $5,000. The process itself looks almost nothing like a traditional construction site. No bricklayers, no scaffolding crews, no cement mixers rumbling in and out all day, just a nozzle moving along a fixed track, laying down material in a continuous zigzag pattern, building up walls layer by layer the way a hot glue gun builds up a shape, except every layer has to be load-bearing and strong enough to hold up a roof and survive an earthquake. Here's what made that number possible. The ink running through WinSun's printer isn't ordinary concrete. It's a mix of cement, fiberglass, and recycled construction waste, material pulled from demolished buildings and leftover mine tailings that would otherwise sit in a landfill. That detail matters more than it sounds. China demolishes and rebuilds so often that the country generates somewhere between 1.6 and 2 billion tons of construction waste every single year, and recycles less than 5% of it. Japan, by comparison, recycles 95% of its construction waste. WinSun's printer ink solves an environmental problem and a cost problem with the same material. Run the actual numbers, and the case for this technology stops sounding like a novelty. Compared to traditional construction, WinSun's process uses 30 to 60% less raw material, cuts construction time by 50 to 70%, and reduces labor costs by 50 to 80%. A 2-story, 1,200 square meter building that would normally take a construction crew months required 1 day of printing, 2 days of assembly, and 3 workers. Put those percentages in more familiar terms. A traditional crew building a modest single-family home might take 3 to 6 months and cycle through a dozen specialized trades in sequence: framers, then electricians, then plumbers, then drywall crews, each one waiting on the last to finish. A 3D printed structure compresses much of that timeline into days, partly because wiring conduits and plumbing channels can get built directly into the print itself instead of added afterward. WinSun didn't stop at 10 cheap houses in China. In 2016, the company completed the world's first 3D printed office building in Dubai. Dubai's government set an explicit public target around the same time: a quarter of all new buildings in the city constructed using 3D printing by 2030, betting that the same speed and labor advantages that worked in a Chinese industrial park would work just as well for a city trying to grow fast without importing an army of construction labor. Partnerships followed with construction firms looking to build factories in Mexico and Russia. What started as a strange news story out of a Chinese industrial park became the opening move in an actual global industry. If you want to know exactly why an American company with hundreds of millions of dollars in funding still hasn't matched this on cost, subscribe, because that story is where this gets genuinely uncomfortable for the people betting on this technology in the US. Here's that story. A Texas-based company called Icon has raised over $450 million since 2017, chasing the same goal: cheap, fast, 3D printed housing. In 2018, it built the first permitted 3D printed home in the US. In 2023, it partnered with major home builder Lennar to construct a 100-home neighborhood outside Austin. Icon's printer works on a similar principle to WinSun's, laying down a specially formulated concrete mixture through a 46-foot-wide robotic arm, building curved walls layer by layer before crews add windows, doors, and a roof. Those homes print in a fraction of the usual time. They're also selling for $450,000 to $600,000, essentially identical to the area's existing median home price. Icon's own early project, House Zero, cost about $160 a square foot to build, worse than conventional construction. A later project brought that down to $34 a square foot, an 80% improvement, but only for the walls, before adding a roof, plumbing, wiring, and finishing. In January of 2025, Icon laid off a quarter of its staff. The company's own internal competition, aimed at designing a 3D printed home for under $99,000, tells you everything about how far even a $2 billion startup still has to go. Picture being a young family right now, watching listings in your price range shrink every year while asking prices for anything decent keep climbing. You've run the mortgage math more times than you'd like to admit, and the number never quite works. That's the actual audience this technology was built for, whether or not the companies chasing it have figured out how to reach them yet. The technology that started in a Chinese industrial park has kept evolving past where WinSun left it too. Instead of printing wall sections on site the way WinSun originally did, newer facilities print entire modules, walls, window openings, even room shells on a continuous factory line, then move them straight to a construction site for stacking, closer to assembling a house out of oversized building blocks than pouring one in place. It's the same underlying idea, refined into something closer to an assembly line for actual buildings. None of this is abstract if you're the one currently priced out of buying a home. The gap between what a median American income can afford and what a median American house actually costs has been widening for years, and the usual proposed fixes, more loans, more subsidies, more permits, don't touch the actual cost of putting a roof over someone's head. A process that cuts materials by up to 60% and labor by up to 80% attacks the one part of that equation nobody else has been able to move. There's a harder question sitting underneath the technology, though. If a factory in China solved this in 2014, and a well-funded American company still hasn't matched it on cost by 2026, the bottleneck was never really the printer. It's everything built up around it: permitting, labor unions, financing models, an entire industry organized around the old way of doing this. Every one of those obstacles exists for a real reason. Safety codes exist because buildings used to kill people when corners got cut. And labor protections exist because construction work used to exploit people badly enough that unions became necessary in the first place. None of that makes the obstacles fake. It just means the printer itself was never really the hard part. The machine that prints a house in a day has existed for over a decade. What's actually been slow is everything humans built around it. If you want to see which other industries have a working solution sitting untouched because of exactly that kind of surrounding bureaucracy, subscribe, because construction is far from the only one. A factory in Suzhou solved the hard part of this problem back in 2014, using material that used to be landfill waste. It took the rest of the world more than a decade to even start catching up, and the country trying hardest still hasn't gotten there. Somewhere between a factory floor in Suzhou and a subdivision outside Austin, a decade got spent proving the same basic idea twice, once cheaply, once expensively. Whatever version of this eventually reaches you will probably split the difference. The cost discipline that started in that Chinese industrial park, paired with whatever it actually takes to get a bank, a permitting office, and your own mortgage lender all comfortable with a house that came off a factory line instead of a job site. You'll just notice the number on your own closing paperwork is smaller than you expected and probably never ask why.